what exactly a day in a security architect's look like, right? It's going to be a very interactive conversation. I don't have any fascinating pictures. I don't have any kind of visually appealing diagrams that I have to show you. It's more around my experience on what exactly I do. Or in case if you aspire to become an architect, probably you would be prepared for some of the cap- capabilities that you might to bring in, some of the challenges that I generally face. You might want to be prepared for those. So let's go ahead with that. Number one, why exactly any organization need an architect? Uh, but before that, is my audio clear and is screen visible? Sorry, I should have asked this earlier. Is everything okay? If yes, if you can give me a quick thumbs up. All right. Is there's no background sound from my side? Any static? Any abrupt robotic voice? No. Perfect. Great. Thank you. And don't worry about the question and answers. I'll be, as you can probably see, there's not a lot of content that I have to share. So we'll have a lot of questions, answers, discussions, interactive sessions that we would have. We'll give everybody an opportunity to speak. Okay, perfect. Now, getting back to the business, why any organization want to hire a security architect? Security architecture, actually, an architect acts as a spearhead. Spearhead, with the spear, a weapon that we use for hunting. An architect acts as a spearhead for any organization. So if you think about, if you visualize the SDLC part, right? The software development lifecycle or system development lifecycle, I'm pretty sure all of you must be familiar with that. So the business need a solution, right? They internally, like project managers, business analysts, the program managers, the development, the customer, business, everybody, they get into the room, they start discussing that, hey, we need an ERP solution, we need a CRM solution, we need an CMDB solution, we need HRMS, or whatever the things are, right? Whatever the fancy things they want to have. They are still discussing about the requirement, right? While they are talking about the functionality of the solution. So if I'm going to have an ERP solution, I would be using it for processing the purchase orders, invoice, the payment processing, and all those kind of a thing, right? While all the people in the room, they're discussing about the functionality, we would also need someone who can take care of the non-functional requirement, such as security, right? So as we are documenting the requirement, we would need someone from the security to be a part of those discussions so that they can assist on the non-functional requirement. That is where the security architect comes into the play. What exactly a security architect would do? A security architect, along with the solution architect. Now, that's a question. What does a solution architect and a security architect have in common and have their differences among it, right? A solution architect is responsible for designing the solution. Security architect review those designs, right? So in that particular room where everybody is talking, discussing about the requirement, the functionality, and everything about the solution, there would also be a solution architect who would gather those requirements and start building the design. The same design that a security architect would be reviewing it, right? So a security architect gets involved in a very, very early phase of the SDLC, right where the design is being prepared, right? So that's the reason in security, one of the very first people, along with the GRC professionals and other assessment that we conduct, security architects plays a pivotal role in understanding the requirement, aligning those business needs from a security perspective. Every organization has their security standards, policies, guidelines, principles that people follow, right? So a security architect sort of memorizes everything, understands what exactly is the policy, standards, procedures, guidelines, and everything, understands the business need, and helps them in marrying those, both of them, right? So that's where the security architect are needed. Security architect wasn't a very fascinating role back in those days, right? Because a lot of time, so I'm talking about like almost 10 years, 15 years ago. So I was fortunate enough to attend a discussion around architecture of a payment systems back in my very early part of the career, around 2011 or 2012, somewhere around, right? Even before I got into the architecture. So I saw people discussing everything on, like, literally they were drawing things on the whiteboard, right? About the designs, and that's a very old school. So that is where a security architect would involve themselves to understand what exactly is their need, right? Why exactly the business would need it, and how exactly they can contribute in terms of aligning the security requirement right at the design phase. Why? Because if things are getting better at the design level, eventually the development and the final product would be better. Imagine you want to build a house. Don't you think you would want to eliminate any kind of a flaws right at the beginning when the design is happening? Not even the three-dimensional, I would say in the two-dimensional, right at on the piece of paper when someone is drawing the blueprint. Don't you think you would want to eliminate any kind of a security related flaws, right? Or even the functionality flaws. You wanted to have a kitchen around like 10 by 12 feet, right? But somehow the the architect or someone managed to squeeze up a kitchen, or the sink is somewhere at the top shelf. You would not want it, right? So an architect helps you in fixing those designs, mostly from a security perspective. That is the reason why people need security architect. And would they be needing security architect forever? Well, until unless you're going to keep on continue to use these solutions, until unless the organization would need to have any kind of an application system, technologies, networks, cloud, emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, blockchain, machine learning, neural networks, whatever the things that organizations are going to use it, they would always continue to need to have security architects. Because as the technology is evolving, so is the threat landscape. We all have been witnessing, right? So that is the reason we would need to have the security architects. What exactly a day looks like for a security architect? What do I do? So one day, my kid asked me, "Hey, Dad, what exactly you do for work?" Right, out of curiosity, because a lot of people of newest generation, they probably relate the security with one role, hacking, right? And somewhere I blame movies for that, right? Because in movies, security means only people in the in their hoodies in the dark room. Nobody sees their faces, right? And they're looking into the computer screen, some kind of a matrix code going up and down, that bizarre kind of a scenario. Trust me, that's probably, I don't know who does that, right? That only suits well in the movie. So a lot of people, including the generation today we are talking about, they understand that security means that people in the darker side, wearing the hoodies, playing with the computer games, or at least what I can tell you, when I joined the industry, or I decided to tell my parents that I'm going to become a security professional, they didn't understand it, right? When I talk to a person who is not very well educated in technology, like talking to a bank person, what do you do? I remember someone, and at the beginning of my career, I told them I'm working as a security analyst. Like they couldn't understand what exactly a security analyst. Probably they thought I'm working as a security guard in some of the industry. And you did your engineering. Why are you working as a security guard? Right. Well, can't blame them, right? That's how exactly the industry interprets. So when my kid asked, what exactly you do for your work, right? What do we do for the living? Well, the simplest way to explain, I actually review the drawings. How do people draw, right? That's what a security architect does. They review people's drawing abilities so that they know what exactly they're going to portray, what exactly it depicts. So, my role, or any security architect's role, is primarily, so it's not a very glamorous role, to be very honest. We don't work on any kind of a technology, we don't have any fascinating tool. A lot of people working into SOC, nowadays they have a fascinating term for that. It's called as cyber defense, right? So they work in a very fascinating environment. Or maybe people from application security, right? They play a lot with the like Burp Suite, App Spider, or Aquinetics, or maybe other kind of a scanners or whatever the things, right? They work on a very fascinating tool. An architect does not. They do not play with any kind of a tools or technology a lot. So what do I do? Well, I understand the business. It's not a very technology centric role. It is but not entirely. It's an amalgamation. It's a combination of understanding the business need as well as knowing the technology, right? It's not a very kind of a fascinating or a glamorous role that a people might perceive that, oh, well, person is a security architect. It's a very highly technical role. Not exactly. Sorry to be a spoiler on that. It's more inclined towards how do you or how well you understand or interpret your business. So if I'm working into, let's say, a healthcare organization, it's my first few days or first few weeks, I should say, right, should be knowing what all my organization does, how exactly my organization earns money, what's the business model. Are they selling anything? Are they selling their products? Are they selling their services? What are the business divisions that we have? How many application landscape that we have, technology landscape that we have, how many people that we have? It's very important to know the business. It's a very key aspect of a security architect to understand what your organization does. Because without that knowledge, you won't be able to advocate any kind of a recommendation. Because an architect doesn't work in a black or a white kind of a situation. There's a lot of gray area. There's a lot of ambiguity that you have to play around, right? For an architect, not everything what is written, it has to be advocated. There's always a middle ground that you have to take. So in order to take a middle ground, knowing what is right is very important. Knowing what your business does, why exactly any requirement is so important for them, it is very important, right? So that's the reason. First few weeks in your job as a security architect, it's very important that you understand the business requirement. All right. So first few weeks, knowing what exactly the business requirements are. Sorry, what exactly your organization does. Apart from that, a very good architect is a very good influencer. Not the kind of an influencer you see on Instagram or other kind of a social media platform. Influencer, someone who can influence the decision making, right? So for example, if someone reaches out to me asking about the requirement, during the discussion, I figured it out. The way they are doing it, it's not wrong, right? But they always make it sound like it's very urgent. They always make it sound like if we don't approve this, we're going to lose billions of dollars, right? So that's how I'm probably, and I think I can speak for a lot of people that that's kind of an urgency that business always try to portray, right? How would you influence it? How would you make them change their mind? How exactly there's a subtle way, those teeny tiny nuances that you provide that can help them in navigating through the requirement that you have from a security perspective. It's not always about technology related challenges. It's very easy, right? If someone wants to do an inbound connection from outside, someone wants to take a remote access to your network, it's a VPN. We can do that. Or in case if there's a third party vendor want to do that, we can do it by a lease line, right? These are the technology solution. Almost everybody can easily give them the solution recommendation that, hey, this is the way you can do that. But it's more around navigating through the people challenges, right? It's all about navigating through the challenges that actually comes from humans. How would you go ahead and influence the decision without making it look like that you're enforcing it? Because you cannot say that, hey, it's written as a part of a policy or a standard. If you can't do that, you cannot go ahead and make your solution live. No, you can't say that. Job of an architect is not about policing around with a whip that if you can't follow these 5 different standards, we won't let you go into production. Can we do that? No, we cannot do that, right? There is let's help them and understand why exactly it is not an appropriate way of doing it. Why exactly you cannot do this? Help them in understanding the risk, right? One of the key aspect of a security architect or a very cool trait to have is that an effective communicator. Explaining things, explaining very, very complicated technical thing to a person, probably selling an like a health insurance or maybe mutual funds, or maybe they're working as a sales guy. How would you go in and explain the complicated topics to them so that they can comprehend? It's very important. right? So it's very important that you communicate in a way that they could understand. You communicate as you're talking to probably a 5-year-old kid. That's one of the key traits of an architect, right? So that you can actually make them understand when you say something that this is not a right way of doing things, they should be able to understand the rationale behind it, right? And that's not only our job. You need to explain them what is the other way. If you cannot do A, see if you can do B. That might not be as good as A, but yes, it will provide me a bit of an assurance that yes, we can do a job. There's a wee bit of a risk there, but yeah, we can get the job done. So it's not about only telling that now this is if you can't do this, there's a risk. Suggest a compensating control. That's very important, right? So first few weeks, knowing about the business, then knowing your stakeholders, whom you're going to work with, right? Not you might not be able to work with literally every fellow in your organization. You would be talking to a lot of your solution architects from the business, solution architects from the sales, marketing, finance, whatever the business divisions that you have, and to the project managers, business analysts, business people, know whom you are going to work with. Who are your direct stakeholders, direct customers that you're going to interact your day-to-day job with, right? Then help them in navigating like a good influencer, right? And you need to be a very good key communicator. Effective communication is the key to that. It is very, very important, right? Now, what role does an architect plays? An architect plays literally multiple roles. A part of my day in first 30 minutes, I might be explaining about what kind of a risk that a particular solution has from a privacy perspective, from a GDPR perspective, from a particular HIPAA perspective. In next 30 minutes, I would probably reviewing what kind of a risk that a microservice might be possessing. In next 30 minutes, I would be reviewing an entire cloud workload solution that's running in AWS EC2 environment. And that's being managed via orchestration tool like your Kubernetes. And after that, I would be probably reviewing any kind of design of a particular infrastructure that is probably going to host the evidence, right? How do you secure that particular facility that's going to have the evidences? So you can see in every 30 minutes, I've been switching multiple hats. I have been playing a role of, let's say, a GRC advisor. Then I've been moving into the application security. Then I switched into cloud workload security. Then I switched into physical security. That is literally what an architect does. They play a role of literally everything and anything. So that's the reason an architect is supposed to have a bits and pieces of understanding of literally everything that an organization does. You might be asked to review the architecture of maybe a graph API permission. You might be asked to review the security of an AI capability or maybe a blockchain, right? You might be asked to review the security of an end user computing. Might be a teeny tiny plugin that's embedded within an Excel file, right? That's talking to a SaaS solution. So you need to have, I won't say like in-depth technical configuration level knowledge of everything. No, that's an engineering. There's a very common misconception between security architecture and security engineering. Security engineers require a configuration level knowledge and understanding of implementing certain things. An architect doesn't implement. Again, going back to the basics, SDLC, where exactly an architect plays a role? At the design phase, not at the deployment phase, right? You can go back and review the solution post deployment. Yes, you can do the validation, but an architect doesn't work into the implementation. If I put it into a very simple way, an architect doesn't get their hands dirty, right? Like doesn't get their jobs done into the implementation, deployment, all those kind of a thing. But they need to have a fun foundational knowledge, a fundamental understanding of literally everything. You might be reviewing a solution that's probably hosted on-prem, or maybe on a private cloud, or maybe on a public cloud as a SaaS. You never know. Or maybe there are three separate components who are talking to each other. They're integrated with each other. So it's very important, very essential that you should know bits and pieces of everything. So I always say this to everyone. How can you become a very good architect? If you are not a master of one, we need jack of all trades. That's a key trait of an architect. They need to know bits and pieces of everything, very versatile. Might not have a very in-depth understanding, but understand what, how does the technology work and how a technology can be potentially compromised, right? So if you think from an attacker's perspective, if you have a visual mindset that you can see the data flowing, you have a various designs in front of you, you can probably understand the flaw in the design through the secure by design principles. You can visually align the security principles that these particular capabilities are not with the aligned pattern and so on. You can go ahead and simply find out the flaws, right? Think from a perspective of an attacker, how your solution can be compromised by a bad guy. If you can think from that perspective, you can be a good security professional. I always say this to everyone who are joining into this industry, right? So role of an architect is versatile. It's not only like one shoe kind of a fits all situation. It's like everything. They play multiple roles, multiple capabilities they need to inherit. That's what an architect does. What goes into the mind of a security architect? Well, that's a difficult question. What goes into the mind of a security architect is, it's very important that they need to refrain themselves from going into the mode of an engineering or implementer, right? So as a security architect, at one place you're advising or advocating about the various privacy concerns, various details around the security requirement, the compliance, whether it is meeting those or not, whether it is following the advocated patterns or not. At the same time, you are also concerned about what are the various risks that a particular solution is already possessed and what kind of risk that it might bring into the overall picture. So let me give an example for this. A business wants you to review a solution security architecture for a solution, and you did your assessment, you conducted your assessment, you found that there are a certain set of risks that is inherited, right? Now, you help them with certain kind of a controls, but that particular control, piece of control, would help in fixing that specific solution. But it might have an implication on overall business, overall organization related, enterprise related problems, because that particular solution might have a dependency on upstream downstream systems. That particular solution might be taking, consuming, or sending the data to other solutions. So you might think that a particular solution is only problematic for this particular business unit. Now it can be dependent on other business units. Overall enterprise level, it can bring in a various different kind of a risk that has a multiple folds of the risk, right? Another capability that you can think, one of the things that you need to always keep in mind, that your job is not to stop the solution from going into production. Yes, I agree that a lot of people would disagree with this, but it's a very important capability and a key aspect of a security architect, that it's not our job to tell the business how they should be conducting the business, right? We can go ahead and provide the recommendation that this is what you can do. In case if they cannot do it, it's not about taking the risk. I'll be talking about that in the challenges part, but it's not only about taking the risk and move ahead. Now, help them in understanding how you can find out an alternate controls so that they can actually meet the requirement even to the teeny tiny bits. Find out what exactly are the technical challenges, why exactly they cannot meet these requirements, right? So it's all about the patterns that an organizations advocate. It's all about the enterprise architecture. So our enterprise architects generally advocate around like, you need to reuse this solution before buying it. You need to buy the solution before building it. So those are some of the development scenarios that we have in the organizations. But it's very important that knowing what are the existing challenges and how exactly a solution can help in mitigating that, right? Now, let's talk about the challenge. And this is something which is one of my favorite topics to talk about. What kind of a challenges that a security architect faces every single day? It's lack of the communication and lack of the awareness. Number one, I'll probably go ahead and vent it out in front of all of you. What are the challenges that I probably think that a lot of organizations have in terms of an architecture? The first thing is lack of awareness. Probably a lot of organizations might not have an awareness that there is a security architecture as a function, why they should be involving. So you might have heard about the term called as shadow IT, right? So shadow IT is a problematic situation where anyone in the organization starts using a solution without following a proper procurement process, without anyone in technology letting them know, without letting the third party risk management know, without letting the procurement team know. So I have a credit card. I'm going to use my credit card to subscribe to any kind of a SaaS solution or maybe any kind of an IaaS solution, and I can start spin up a new environment and start using it. Nobody knows about it. No one knows that there is an instance of an application running in the organization's network, or probably someone is using that from an organization's network, and nobody has vetted that, right? So there are multiple ways that people can find out a flaw and they can exploit it, right? Not that they have some kind of an uh, deliberate attempt of compromising the security. No, not that we are not trusting their integrity or some kind of a challenge is there. It's more around lack of awareness, right? A lot of times what happens, business starts using this solution because maybe it's not very expensive. Maybe the salesperson was very successful in pitching up the solution and they got fascinated about it and they started using it. Nobody in the organization, nobody in the technology, nobody in the security is aware that there is a solution. And later on, when someone reaches out, hey, we are looking at a new solution. Who reviewed it? And everybody has a blank face. Nobody knows about it. It's because nobody is aware that there's a process. And who is responsible for that? Who's responsible for advocating and selling their processes? Unfortunately, it's us. We would think that it's their problem. No, security is not any individual's problem. It's everyone's problem, right? This is one of the most difficult choices that you have made in your career, to choose to be a security professional, because you cannot sit back and relax for a day that, oh, yes, yesterday I did my job. I think everything is secure now. No, we cannot have that luxury, right? So it's very important that you need to go ahead upfront, start advocating that, hey, you guys need to involve us. You guys need to follow the process. You guys need to make sure that in case if you need anything, these are the steps that you have to follow, right? Like I said, reuse first, think about buying first, then think about building. That's how a lot of like the enterprise architecture follows. But yes, there has to be an awareness. There has to be cascading of the information. And it's not just one time. Think about taking a kind of a session almost every year or once in 2 years. It's important. Another set of challenges. Accepting the risk is an escape route for a lot of people. And I'm sure all of you might have gone through this kind of a challenge, right? So they reach out to you that, hey, there's a assessment, because they cannot go into the production without your approval, right? So you need to give your stamp. So they reach out to you that, hey, we have a new solution. Can you help us in reviewing it? And you say, oh, well, first of all, they might not involve you right from the beginning. They have a release on Friday and they engaged you on Wednesday, right? They would say, well, I have a release day after tomorrow. Can you can we get a sign off from you? Well, you are totally blank on what exactly the solution we are referring to. Why exactly we were not involved, right? It's a very common problem. And when you start reviewing it, there are risks. There are so many concerns around it. And you say, well, I don't think it's a very nice idea if we should have the solution go ahead in the production just like this, because there's a tons of challenges and I think it might get compromised very soon. Well, I don't have a budget this time. Maybe let's accept there's a thing called as risk acceptance, right? Let's do that. Let's move the solution into production, and then we can think about fixing the problems retrospectively. This is a very, very common pattern, and I personally believe that should not be an excuse, because what happens if everybody starts reviewing, or probably the accepting the risk, right? Even if it is a low risk, right? Every low risk, if you accumulate, turns out to be a very high risk. A single low risk might not be a concern, but 15,000 low risk, oh gosh, goodness, God's grief. It's something which is a tons of problem. So not everybody understands the importance of risk acceptance. That actually shows the commitment towards the security that an organization has. Because who at the end accepts the risk? Someone who's responsible for fixing it, right? Someone who made a choice of using the solution without going through a proper process. It's the business, right? I know. It's something that people tend to say that, hey, it's a one small risk. Why exactly it's hampering us? We can move it. Well, it's one small risk for you, but look at from an enterprise perspective. There are already hundreds of risks that people have already accepted it. Risk acceptance must not be done unless there is a very genuine reason why you have chosen to accept it. What's the limitation? Why is it stopping you? Don't mellow yourself down unless you get your answer, right? It's not about scaring them off. It's about finding out the right reasons. Because at the end, and sorry if I'm sounding too realistic, because at the end, when something goes wrong, we would be the first one who would be pointed fingers at that, hey, I think you reviewed the solution. Did you not see the issue there? So security is not an easy role. So it's very important that you question them. Why exactly this was actually a problem in terms of implementing the solution rather than choosing to accept the risk. Risk acceptance should not be an excuse or an escape route for any solution to move into the production, right?